theme on the 5 aspects of the spiritual life, or the 5 aspects of the spiritual path, which is Sangharakshita's, it's his kind of formulation of the spiritual life or the spiritual path. And I'll talk to you about a specific part of that path, but I haven't put it up on the board. I've put Vidanya's little reframing up on the board. And I didn't put it up because last week Vidanya took us through them again, and he said if we keep telling you what they are, one day we might remember them. So I thought we'd have a little go at remembering them. So, here we go. Who can shout out the first aspect of the spiritual life?
Integration.
Integration, thank you. Okay, so we have integration. Next one?
Positive emotion.
Positive emotion. Third one?
Spiritual death.
Spiritual death. Spiritual rebirth at the end. Receptivity. Thank you very much. You've all been listening. So I'm just going to recap on what those are. So you've guessed the stages. Thank you very much. So we've got integration. That's the first one. So that's becoming whole, becoming a unified individual. So that's rather than being conflicted or having conflicting desires or conflicting goals in our life. So if we can become more aware of all the different strands that make us the person that we experience ourselves as, if we can become aware of all those strands, then we can look to use the energy that's within all of them as well. So if we become integrated, we can harness all the energy that makes us who we are, the energy that's contained in our lower drives and our lower desires, and also the energy that can be released if we can access our potential, if we can contact the higher aspects of ourselves. So yeah, that's integration, and Vidanya's called that becoming an individual. So that's the first stage, is we need to become an individual, become integrated. And we've got positive emotion, so that's becoming more connected to those around us. That might be through metta, through loving kindness, through gratitude or reverence. And we've had talks on positive emotion in previous weeks. So this is actively cultivating that which is beautiful, that which is conducive to positive mental states. That's positive emotion, and that's becoming a connected individual. So after we've become an individual, become a connected individual. And then we move on through to spiritual death. So once we're integrated and positive, we can have spiritual death in our life. So that's growing, becoming a different person, leaving behind old versions of ourselves, old views of ourselves, old habits that we have in our life. So spiritual death is letting go of old habits, realising that we're not who we think we are, we're not what we think we are, and we don't necessarily have to be what we think we have to be. So we can be different. We can experience spiritual death. We can let go of old views, old habits, change the way that we live. So we can let go of being a limited individual. We might see ourselves as being a particular person, capable of particular things. Spiritual death is letting go of that view. And then we can step into spiritual rebirth. So this is opening up to the energy and transformation that's available once we've left behind old habits and old views. If we don't have any fixed views anymore, we can open up into transforming into being a different person, having rebirth into being different. So once we experience spiritual death, there's a kind of space that opens up, because those fixed habits, we've left them behind, there's a space. And spiritual rebirth is what happens in that space, who we can become. It's what takes place in the space that's opened up. So we can step into that, we can live it out. And this is newer, it might be more real. We're more connected to other people, and we're more connected to the truth of interrelatedness when we have experienced spiritual death and then spiritual rebirth. That's becoming more than an individual. So we become an individual, become a connected individual, let go of being a limited individual, becoming more than an individual. So integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth. And then we have receptivity, and we'll hear more about receptivity later on in this theme. So we've had lots of talks on integration and positive emotion, and then Vidanya introduced spiritual death last week and spiritual rebirth by talking about Kids Who Go To Me. So this week we're going to have 3 short talks from people about stories that have been important in their life that illustrate spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. So again, we're focusing on spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, with 3 short talks, 3 stories that illustrate this. So first we'll hear from Simon, then Santasiddhi, and then I'll be on again. So start with Simon.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. My story takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. If you don't get the reference, it's Star Wars, and you really should go and see it because it's brilliant. It really is. Also, though, there's spoiler alert. Yeah. So most people who've seen Star Wars have picked up on little bits of Buddhist-like teachings from the little goblin sort of Zen-type master Yoda. It's often heard saying things like "do" or "do not." There is no try. But the Buddhist ideas in Star Wars, to me, go much deeper than these little sort of phrases said by Yoda quite often. And I want to talk about the journeys of two of the main attractions of the film. So yeah, we'll begin with episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Trying to fit 6 movies into 15 minutes, by the way, hard. Yeah, so in The Phantom Menace, we meet a young boy called Anakin Skywalker. He's a little slave child who lives with his mother on the planet Tatooine, and he spends most of his free time, which is a real surprising amount for a slave, but there you go. Yeah, racing about in these sort of space cars called pods and dreaming about freeing his people. So to cut a long story short, through some sort of complicated galactic politics that nobody really understands, so it's a bit like real life. Yeah, 2 Jedi Knights and a Queen find themselves stranded on his home planet, and they find themselves coming into Anakin's life. The Queen, of course, as is always the case with these things, is beautiful, kind, friendly and charming, and her and the young boy get on really like a house on fire, which turns out to be really handy because Anakin's owner happens to have the ship part that they need in order to leave Tatooine, and it's also handy because one of the Jedi notices that Anakin's got this sort of special quality about him that means that he's probably going to be someone who's very important to the Jedi, because he is strong with the Force. The Force is kind of this all-pervading power that you could say is a bit like reality itself. And to try and live in harmony and be at one with the Force is the aim of the Jedi path. A bit like the aim of the Buddhist path is, and you could say that being strong with the Force is a bit like being receptive to the Dharma. But there's 2 sides to the Force. There's the light side and there's the dark side. The light side represents being a person of compassion, living through metta towards other people, to operate not out of your own selfish wants and desires, but to operate from metta. And the dark side of the Force represents the complete opposite to this. It represents being wrapped up in your own ego, operating from selfish desire and acting out of greed, hatred and delusion. The dark side is suffering. The dark side is dukkha. Jedi see that the young Anakin has got this natural ability to sort of be in tune with the Force and suspect that he might be a very important person. So this Jedi makes a bet with Anakin's owner that Anakin can win one of these pod races. The prize, of course, being the ship part that they want, but also that Anakin gets freed and is allowed to be trained as a Jedi Knight. Of course, he does win, and he is freed, and off he goes to get trained up by the dashing young Obi-Wan Kenobi. But this is only the beginning of Anakin's story. Over the course of the next 2 films, we see him grow up into a man, and we see him start to learn from Obi-Wan Kenobi the Jedi path, which is surprisingly similar to the Buddhist path in some ways. The Jedi are encouraged to train their minds, to meditate, to be mindful of both the present and their feelings, that to dwell in negative emotion is the path to the dark side, and to cultivate positive, expansive emotions that lead us towards a sense of connectedness with other beings, and to dwell and cultivate in stillness is the path to the light side. And we watch as Anakin falls in love with Amidala, the Queen, who he met when he was a young boy. The 2 spend most of the next film sort of staring into each other's eyes. Developing this love that can't be, because Jedis aren't supposed to be in relationships. So when he confesses his love to Amidala, she asks him, "Are the Jedi even allowed to love?" To which he replies, "Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say we're encouraged to love. But ultimately, it's his inability to let go of his attachments that lead to his downfall. As the relationship grows, Anakin gets more and more attached to Amidala. So when he has a dream, there's a premonition of a death. Of course, he's distraught. He can't accept that this could be a fate and that he might lose her, because his feelings for her aren't feelings of metta and compassion, they're feelings of possession. She's his and he doesn't want to lose her. So he goes to Master Yoda and he asks if there's anything he can do to save her, if he can cheat death in any way. Yoda tries to teach Anakin that death is just a natural part of life that happens to anyone, and that he should let go of his fear of losing Amidala. He tells him that fear is the path to the dark side. He tells him that attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. I'm not going to do that. He says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. But Anakin can't accept this. He ignores the teachings and he becomes more and more self-regarding, and he becomes consumed by his negative emotion and fear. Sorry, I got lost there. He gets seduced by the Emperor, who's a Dark Lord, who tells him that he can help him cheat death and save Amidala's life, but of course he can't, and she dies giving birth to his children. But she's seen that he's been seduced by his negative emotions and the dark side, and she requests that the children be taken away and hidden from him, because he didn't know she was pregnant. Anakin's failure to look beyond himself, his failure to let go of his attachments, his failure to let go of his own wants and desires, means that he's completely absorbed by greed, hatred and delusion, and it's what turns him to the dark side. He becomes the Emperor's new Sith apprentice. The Sith are kind of like the anti-Jedi, and he becomes this sort of galactic boogeyman, Darth Vader. He helps his new master conquer the galaxy and force billions into enslavement. This brings us to episode 4, A New Hope. 4 movies already, in this movie we meet Luke, Anakin's son. Luke lives back on Tatooine with his aunt and his uncle, and he's got no idea about who he really is. And he spends, much like his father, most of his time dreaming of going off and fighting the Empire and freeing his people. There's lots of other parallels with his father's story as well. Through some sort of complicated politics that nobody really understands, a Jedi Knight comes into Luke's life. In fact, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, the same Jedi Knight who trained his father up. Luke too is strong with the Force, and Luke too is trained up by Obi-Wan Kenobi in the ways of the Jedi. But in A New Hope, Luke is this kind of gung-ho type who's out for adventure. His mind's very much focused on himself. He wants to go off and save the princess. He wants to be the hero of the piece. And he very much is, actually. Through a little bit of skill and a lot of luck, he goes off and he defeats Darth Vader and the Emperor. But he doesn't do this for a sense of compassion for others. He does this because it inflates his sense of self-worth. It boosts his ego and it makes him feel special. We can see that early on in Luke's story, there's a real danger that it might end in the same place as his father's, with him turning to the dark side. So in The Empire Strikes Back, the 5th movie, the second part of Luke's story, Luke's introduced to Master Yoda. Yoda can see this, that Luke's path might end up at the dark side. So Yoda tries to teach him and guide him towards the light side. Yoda can see that just as his father, Luke's full of fear of losing things and people, fear of death, fear of not being the hero, fear of the truth. Yoda teaches him. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. But But Luke, just like his dad, Anakin, ignores this. He fears and he hates the Emperor and Darth Vader, so he goes off to save the day again and enters into battle with them. But this time he's not so lucky, because Darth Vader's much more well-trained, much stronger, and he just defeats him easily, in the process chopping off his hand and revealing to him that, yes, Luke, I am your father, which Luke's not very happy about. Darth Vader tries to tempt Luke to join him, to overthrow the Emperor so that they can rule the galaxy together, but Luke refuses this. He escapes and he gets himself a nice new robot hand, which is another parallel with his father's story, who also lost a hand and has a robotic replacement. So we come to episode 6, Return of the Jedi, the final showdown between Luke and his father and the Emperor. At the beginning of this movie, Luke returns to Master Yoda to finish his training. But Yoda and Obi-Wan have become consumed themselves by the fear that they tried to warn Luke against. They worry that Darth Vader and the Emperor are going to destroy everything that is good in the galaxy. And they ask Luke to do something very un-Jedi-like. They ask him to kill his father. But Luke has begun to progress as a Jedi and as a spiritual being. He's started to see himself as a connected individual, and he's started to see everyone else as a connected individual. He's no longer consumed by his own ego. Luke's had an insight. Darth Vader can change, that the darkness inside him and the darkness in everyone else isn't all there being, that there's light in everyone that can be cultivated and grow. So when the final showdown arrives, Luke's in this real sort of inner turmoil. He believes that he can save his father, but his teachers, the people that he trusts, are telling him that he can't. So when he's battling it out with his father as well, the Emperor is trying to tell him to kill Darth Vader as well, because the Emperor can see that if he does this, he'll turn to the dark side and that he'll be an even more stronger ally for him. So he's getting it from all sides basically. Kill Darth Vader, kill Darth Vader. But during the battle, Luke chops off his father's hand. The hand falls to the floor and Luke looks down and he sees that it's a robot hand, just like his own robot hand. And he sees at that moment, me and my dad we're the same. I'm at an impasse that my dad was at years ago. I have a choice to make. The choice that I make will decide the person that I become in the future. He realises this was true for his father as well. He realises this is true for everyone. It's at that moment that he throws down his lightsaber. He chooses not to kill Darth Vader. He chooses instead to show him compassion. Luke has been reborn as a person who acts only out of compassion for the well-being of others. It's at this moment as well that Darth Vader sees the error of his ways. He sees that his son's right. He sees that compassion is the real way. And he decides to help Luke and overthrows the Emperor. But in the process, he's unfortunately mortally wounded and he begins to die. When Luke tells his dying father that he wanted to save him, his dad turns to him and says that he has already saved him. Darth Vader is no more. Anakin Skywalker has been reborn as a being of compassion. The death of Darth Vader is a metaphor for what's happened to both of them. They've had a spiritual death. And right at the end of the movie, when we see Anakin's ghost, fully robed in his Jedi robes, this is a sign that he's achieved a spiritual rebirth, just like his son. Thank you.
Change of scene. Parley Cannon. I'm a bit more at home in that. I must probably be the only person here who doesn't know at all about any of that.
now, though, don't you?
I do know now, so I don't need to see any of them, do I? Okay, so my name is Sona. I lived at the time of the Buddha, and I lived at Shravasti, where he often was hanging out. And I was given the name of Sona of the many children, which is strange because I only had 10 children, and that was not that uncommon in those days. Lots of people had 10 children. I suspect I got that name because I did have a tendency to tell everybody how wonderful they were, and that my daughters were perfect and my sons would be great, and I think probably that's why people got a bit tired of it and called me Sona of the many children. But they were my life. I spent all my time, when I wasn't pregnant, I got a baby. When the babies grew up, I was looking for husbands for them. I was educating them, I was cooking, I was cleaning, I was keeping my husband sweet. I was just working all the time. And it was great. I'd got such good kids. And I felt very proud and very sure of what I was doing. And yeah. Fixing their marriages was something else. That was quite difficult, but I enjoyed it too, having to look out for a suitable partner. And I brought up my girls to be very deferential and modest, and I couldn't understand why anybody wouldn't snap them up. So, although it was hard work, it was very satisfying to get them all fixed. So, basically, what a good life. And then my husband, who had been a follower of the Buddha for quite a number of years, he decided that that wasn't enough, he'd like to be a monk. So that was a bit of a shock to the system. I couldn't understand why. We'd got this beautiful life together, we brought up these kids together, we were quite well off by that time, everything was going really well. Anyway, he was off, there's no point in arguing with him. So, what do I do now? I'm kind of used to sorting things out, really. If things don't go quite my way, well, what's the point of sitting and moping? Got to be a solution, I can sort it out. So I thought, okay, if he can do that, I don't want to be left looking after everything. What I'll do is I'll get all the kids together, because they're pretty much all left home by then. I'd get them all together and I'd say, look, I'll hand over the wealth, you can sort it, you can look after it and worry about it, and I'll just come visiting and you can just look after me. I don't have big needs. You can just kind of look out for me. And that'll be fine, won't it? So far so good. They went along with that. They said that's fine. They were pretty happy to have more dosh around the place. And they thought, well, we can share her out. But it didn't work. It didn't work at all. It was horrible, actually. Very quickly, it was nasty. These were children I'd given my life to, I looked after them, I'd sat up with them, I'd done everything for them. They'd been my life. And they were rude. They said, well, our dad's gone a bit balmy, hasn't he, going off to be a monk? What's he want to do that for? And you're not even going to be a nun, are you? You're just nobody. You just want us to look after you. We don't want to. So I felt really bitter. I didn't know what I'd done, because I'd given my life to these kids. And they were horrible. They were unkind, they were resentful, they were rude. I did not know what to do. I felt really stuck. It was something I couldn't fix. And it took me quite a long time to realise that I'd actually, yes, I brought them up, and I thought that I was being loving, but I'd been loving thinking that I'd reap the benefits, that they'd look after me in my old age. And no way. They didn't want to. So what had my life been about? My life had been about these children, and they weren't human beings that I even liked anymore. So I had a lot of thinking to do and a lot of grieving to do, because it wasn't what I'd expected at all. I'd enjoyed my life. I'd assumed I would go on enjoying my life. So I realised that the love I'd had for them had been pretty, it hadn't been selfless at all. I thought it had been, I'd not thought about it. Just that I pour everything into these kids. And I thought, well, how am I going to find out about real love then? Because I'm not going to get it from them. I don't know. How am I going to find it? So I thought, well, maybe I'll try the homeless life. That's what my husband's done. Maybe he's onto something. And I thought, I'll go and live with the nuns. And instead of this dusty home life, I'll find this beautiful life with all these lovely women, and it'll be peaceful and loving and magic. Doesn't sound like most communities I've ever lived in, but never mind. This was going to be the solution. So that's what I did. I asked if I could join the nuns, and I thought, oh, this way I will learn what I need to know. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, I suppose I haven't seen myself very clearly up until then. But you see, I got to live with these women, and most of them were, they were younger than my granddaughters. They were really young women, and they didn't know how to do things. I had to tell them. They didn't. The way they sewed their robes, it was so messy. So, obviously I'd say, well, I think you're going to have to take that out, it's just not good enough. And they didn't like that particularly. And, everything they did, it was I just knew better, actually. I was older than them, wasn't I? So I think it was reasonable, really, to just tell them how to do it properly. But it didn't go down very well. So, yeah, that was hard. It was hard. It wasn't this lovely, peaceful, beautiful experience that I thought it would be. But I did realise that maybe, just maybe, they had something to teach me. So that's tough. You get towards the end of your life and you think, well, you're used to being the expert, or at least you're used to being somebody who knows something. And you're used to having some skills, and you're used, etc., etc. I could go on. And here were these young things who actually had got loads to teach me. I don't know what the Pali for drat is, but that's it. It was difficult. But it was also urgent that I learnt, because I was getting old, and, well, I was in a hurry, in a way. I wasn't quite sure what I needed to do, but I thought, I just need to try and listen to them, try and bite my tongue, try and understand what they've got to teach me, and meditate. So what I did was, during the day we were quite busy, but overnight, I didn't have any particular tasks, so I just sat up and meditated. I used to do a lot of walking meditation in the night, because otherwise you fall asleep. So I just go on meditating. And I don't know whether I was getting anywhere, but it's somehow all that energy that I'd had for the family life felt as though it had found something to do, it had found a focus. So, yeah, I didn't have anything else. I didn't have anywhere else to turn. If I didn't have faith in myself, at least I had faith in the Buddha. So I just hung on to that and hoped that somehow this life would work for me. Well, on we go. And one day, they'd all gone out and they left me and just said, would you boil some water for us so when we come back it's hot? So I filled up this great cauldron with water, put it on the stove. I forgot to light it, but never mind, I put it on the stove. And then I started meditating again. And as I was meditating, I just really saw my whole life, you know, the changes that had happened, the painful changes, the more positive changes. I just saw everything changing, all the conditions that I'd lived through. And I saw how much pain I'd caused myself, and no doubt other people, but I could really feel it for myself. And all I can say is that I saw something that I'd not seen before. So when the nuns came back and they said, "Where's our hot water?" I said, "Oops." And I didn't feel terrible, but I'd forgotten. I just said, "I'll get it hot for you, sorry." And I told them that I'd seen something definitely had happened to me. And they could see I'd changed. And what I said, it's in the Pali Canon, so it must be true, are the very words that I spoke at the end. Because all that I've been talking about has been a series of spiritual deaths. Losing who I thought I was, losing all that pride in being who I thought I was, not knowing what I was going towards, but having the faith to keep on going. And, yeah, that's what does it look like when you've let go of who you thought you were? I don't know. The Pali Canon certainly doesn't tell us, but it tells you my last words, which were, when I had this insight, "With one pointed mind, well composed, I saw the truth of impermanence. Immediately I was released, quenched, with the end of clinging. Fie on you, O wretched aging. Now there is no more re-becoming."
Okay, so we're not in a galaxy far, far away, nor are we in ancient India. We're now kind of coming more into the modern era. Anyway, it's the turn of the century, so I'm going to talk about the Secret Garden. So some of you may be familiar with the story of the Secret Garden. It's a book. It was published in 1911, I think. Yeah, 1911 by Francis Hodgson Burnett. So I have a copy of the book here that Jordana lent to me, because right at the beginning of this theme, we were asked to talk in our little discussion groups about any story that we felt had helped us to understand life in this kind of spiritual way. And The Secret Garden has been a story that's been with me ever since I was a child. I've not actually read it though, so Jordana gave me the book so that I could read it, because I saw it as a film that came out in 1994, so I was about 11, which is the same age as the main characters in the book, in the story. So I saw it at the cinema twice, and then I had it on video, and I watched it and watched it and watched it. It really captured my imagination, so I will tell you that story tonight. Okay, so it's a story of little Mary Lennox. So Mary Lennox is a young girl. She's 10 years old, and she lives in India with her parents. But she doesn't really see anything much of her parents. She's looked after by Indian servants, and they kind of just keep her happy enough so that her parents don't really know that she's around, really. So she's on her own a lot of the time. She's very, very spoiled, but she doesn't really have anyone to play with. She doesn't have anyone to show her any love. Her servants just kind of respect her dutifully. So she's there in India, just being quite spoiled, but not really enjoying life very much. But then there's a cholera epidemic. So in the book, her parents die of cholera. In the film, there's an earthquake. So she's left all alone. She's alive, but she's completely alone. And she's found by some local British soldiers, and they realise they're going to have to do something with this little girl, so they send her home. So she has to make the journey all the way back from India to home. And home is Misselthwaite Manor, which is in the moors. So she's picked up by an old lady and taken back to the Misselthwaite Manor, where she's told she'll meet her family. But her family is Mr. Craven, who's her uncle, and he's a bit of he isolates himself away. He doesn't really want to see her at all. So she's left in two rooms just to kind of while away her time in these 2 rooms in this huge manor. She does have someone to come and look after her. She has Martha. So Martha's a local girl who's allowed to work in this manor as a servant. And so Martha comes in every day and kind of makes the coal fire and brings Mary her porridge. Mary's not so fussed about the porridge. She's not so fussed about Martha's kind of friendly, chatty ways either. She's not quite used to it. But every day Martha comes, gives her porridge, tries to get her to get dressed and enjoy life a little bit. And Martha can see that this child's pretty, well, she just doesn't know really how to talk to people. She doesn't really know how to be kind. So she talks to her about her family, and Martha tells her about her mum and her brothers and sisters. She's got loads of brothers and sisters back in the cottage across the moor. So she kind of tries to warm Mary up a little bit by talking about her family, and she sends her off out into the gardens. So around this manor there's loads and loads of gardens, and Mary's just left to kind of wander around these gardens on her own and to see what she can find, really. She also hears, so she's wandering around the garden, she meets a gardener, Ben Weatherstaff, who's a little bit grumpy, but she gets chatting to him. And Martha also tells her about a walled garden. So when Mary's kind of wondering a little bit about her family, she hears that her uncle locked this garden up. So there's a locked garden somewhere in the grounds that nobody's allowed to go into. And he locked that up because his wife died about 10 years previously. So that's why Mr. Craven is so isolated and doesn't want to see anybody, because his wife died and he's grieving. So Mary's quite interested in this. She's not interested in much. She's kind of quite a sour little girl, but she hears about this garden. She's wondering about it. So she kind of walks around the gardens and finds this wall, and she's pretty sure that this locked away garden is behind this wall. She tries to talk to Ben Weatherstaff about it, but he doesn't want to talk about it either. He does introduce her to a little robin, though. This little robin redbreast bird that she starts to take a little bit of a liking to. And that's pretty much the first time she's ever taken a liking to anybody. Maybe she's starting to like Martha a little bit. She's interested a little bit in these brothers and sisters, but the robin is really her first real friend. And the robin kind of hops about and sings to her each day. And one day she's walking up and down this walled, overgrown with ivy wall. The robin kind of stops at a little place and kind of tweets away at her. And she kind of goes over to look at the robin. She's like wondering why the robin's so interested in this little bit of ground. And she looks down at the ground, and there's a little bit of like upturned soil. And then she goes and looks in that soil, she finds a key. So I like to think the key looks a little bit something like this. So she has a key, and she's pretty sure that it must be the key to the garden. And then slowly but surely, she, again, with the help of the robin, finds the door, puts the key in the lock, opens the door, and finds herself in this locked away garden that nobody's been in for 10 years. She's very, very happy to find it, but she's not really sure if it's alive. So she asks Martha if she can have any help with this garden, and Martha sends her young brother, Dickon, to help. So Dickon's a very, very good-natured boy. He gets on with all of the animals in the gardens and on the moors. And he helps Mary with the garden and tells her that really, yes, it is, it's alive. They can nurture it, they can cultivate it. And come springtime, come summertime, it will blossom into a beautiful garden if they give it a little bit of help. So that's what they start to do. They start to cultivate this garden together. While all this is happening, when Mary's in the house, she hears a cry, a distant cry occasionally, that Martha tries to just explain away by saying it's the wind coming off the moors. But she's sure that she hears a crying sound, like a young person crying. And she starts to investigate around the manor. And sure enough, she comes across a little boy, a boy the same age as her. And this is Colin, her cousin, that she didn't even know existed. And she finds this boy, he's in bed. He says that he can't walk, he's got something wrong with his back, and that he's been in bed ever since he was a tiny baby. That's all he knows, is being in bed in his bedroom. And that's why he's crying every night, because he's lonely. So she starts to spend time with Colin and talks to him about her life, and they realise they've got quite a lot in common. They're both very, very lonely, quite neglected. They've not really had anyone to love or anyone to love them. And Mary has a feeling that Colin might also benefit from being in the garden. So her and Dickon conspire and manage to get a wheelchair and get Colin in the wheelchair. They wheel him out to the garden, and they all spend time in the walled garden together. As they're spending time there and chatting and having a lovely time, Ben Weatherstaff, the gardener, finds them. He looks over the wall and is really shocked to find them in the garden because nobody's really allowed in there. And he's really surprised to see Colin out of bed because he's heard about this boy who's left in bed because he can't walk. And he says, "I thought you were a cripple." So Colin, hearing that, thinks, I'll show him I can walk. And the strength that's come to him through his friendship with Mary and being outside in the garden where they're cultivating all of this growth, all of this beauty in the garden, and he stands up from his wheelchair and takes a few steps. And sure enough, Colin can actually walk. There may have been something wrong with his back, but not as bad as people thought, and he learns how to walk. So what a lovely story. So that's Mary, Colin and Dickon all in the garden, enjoying their lives together, finding friendship, finding how to love one another and how to be loved. But what about this uncle? What about Mr. Craven? So he's gone off, he just goes travelling. He doesn't really want to be in the manor because it's so full of grief for him. But slowly he starts to think maybe there is something at home for him. And he decides to come home. And Mary and Colin haven't told anyone that Colin can walk yet. And when Mary's uncle comes back, he wants to know where the children are, and he finds them in the garden, and he finds Colin walking, and he's completely overcome with shock and with hope, I suppose. You know, he just didn't ever think that could happen. And so he comes back into contact with Colin. He didn't spend any time with him before. And he finds out that it's Mary who's done this. It's Mary who's come to the manor, who's found the garden, who's opened the garden again and brought love and fun and possibility back to Misselthwaite Manor. So that's the story. So I wanted to tell you this story just because it's been so important to me. I think I've related to it just because Mary, she started off quite isolated, quite lonely. And as she started to learn how to make friends with other people, how to express herself through gardening or through talking to Dickon, talking to Colin, she finds that she can change from being quite a spoiled and unruly and contrary girl into being somebody who learns how to love and learns how to be loved by other people. And I think it's a really great story because I think it shows all aspects of the spiritual path. So she returns home from India and finds out about her past. She finds out about her family and she meets her family. So I see that as an integration. She's coming into contact with who she is and learning about who she is and meeting other people in her life. And then through spending time in nature, through making friends with Martha, through hearing about all the love at Martha's home and hearing about the brothers and sisters and how they all play together, she also learns how to love people and how to be loved. She meets Dickon. She makes a friend. Well, firstly, she makes a friend with a little Robin. And her imagination is kind of inspired through this idea of the garden, that she can help things to grow, help bring life into the world. So that's positive emotion. She learns how to become friends with people. And at one point, I think Martha says to her, when she's talking about her brothers and sisters, Mary thinks, "Oh, they won't like me. Nobody ever likes me." And Martha says, "Well, how do you like yourself?" So I thought that was bringing in, just because we start with ourselves in the Metabhavana, don't we? So Mary realises that actually she has to learn how to be somebody that other people might like before anybody else likes her. So I think it really shows how important friendship is, this story. So we do hear about friendship quite a lot here at the Buddhist Centre. So we hear that the Buddha said to Ananda, his friend, that spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. So through friendship we can relate more to each other as individuals. We can draw the best out of each other, and that's what Mary starts to do with Colin. She sees that he has potential, and she helps draw that potential out for Colin. I think I wanted to talk about it when it came to spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, because I think spiritual death, for me, relationships with other people has often symbolised spiritual death for me. So dropping barriers, having a boundary between me and other people, and learning how to express myself, learning how to trust people, move towards intimacy is always that's been a way that I've related to spiritual death. So if I've become an individual and I've become connected, I need to let go of being a limited individual, and I can do that through communicating with another person and realising that people aren't as different to me as I think they might be, or I'm not as special or unique as I want to be, that I can communicate with others and find that there's something really beautiful in that connection. I found that can happen a lot through communication exercises on retreat, where you just sit and look at each other for a while. And one of you starts saying something random and the other person just says yes quite a lot. It's a bit weird, but when I first did that on a retreat, and afterwards I found I could just look at people more and I could feel more connected with people, and that felt like a real spiritual death, that I wasn't so limited and solitary as I think I am, or as I thought I was. So once we find this key of relating to another person, if we can unlock the doors that we normally put up around ourselves, once that door's open, then there is no boundary between us and another person. So that's why I think this story is quite good for spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, because we're opening those doors to remove these barriers that we think are between us and others. So if I can trust somebody enough to let down these barriers and become more intimate with them, if I can become more honest, and if I'm able to stay in this space where someone else isn't quite as different to me as I think they are, then I'm in this space where I'm less fixed and they're less fixed, and there's a potential then that can arise. And it's taken me a bit of time, I think, to move from seeing communication as spiritual death to seeing that it's also rebirth, because that communication that arises between you and another person, that itself is rebirth. You're able to live in a way, or experience things in a way that you weren't before. So I think Mary does this. She learns how to drop these barriers, how to be honest with people, how to express herself, how to become a friend and help others to reach their potential. And through this, she completely transforms. She transforms from being this sour, contrary little girl who thinks of herself as very separate, to a girl that's friendly and loving and brings a lot of love to her family, a lot of love to the manor. And she brings love to other people, and other people love her. She just completely transforms. She transforms her cousin into a boy in bed who nobody ever sees, and her uncle is transformed into a loving uncle and father. Her uncle remembers how to love. And throughout all of this story, the garden starts to blossom. So she arrives in Misselthwaite Manor in winter. It becomes spring and then summer. So the garden starts to blossom, just as the people in the story start to blossom. And they start to live lives in a way that they could never have imagined was possible. So I'll just talk a little bit about this garden symbol. Why is the secret garden, why is it using the garden as a symbol? So we hear quite a lot about how we cultivate positive emotions so that we can become more connected and more in line with reality. So there's that cultivation aspect of allowing things to grow, that we can actually purposefully look to cultivate what's positive. And I think I like talking about this right now because it's spring and we're starting to see crocuses and daffodils and primroses starting to blossom. You have a dull, bare patch of land on the side of the pavement, you think nothing would grow there, but then slowly but surely these beautiful flowers can grow. And I think we see that here at the Buddhist Centre. We see people coming along to the introductory course, and within weeks they completely change. Somebody might come along looking very tired, they might be depressed, or they might just be a bit bored of life. And slowly but surely they come along to the classes here and start to kind of really look a bit revived, look a bit kind of nourished and brighter. Their complexions change, people start standing up a little bit taller, they start looking at you a little bit more. And this was my experience of doing introductory course as well, that I just had so much energy through coming along to the course. And then, so over weeks, over years, people grow, people change and transform, just as the garden transforms in this story. And I'd like to think that this Buddhist Centre itself is a little bit like a little secret garden, and we've all found this secret garden, we've all found the key to this garden, and we've got the big boundary wall that contains our gardens and contains the land that this Buddhist Centre's on, and it's got a little opening with some little steps, and we've all found that opening through the wall into this secret garden. And there's a little stone, I don't know if you've seen on the corner of this boundary wall, that someone's inscribed love onto, which I think is great. Because here, we may find how we can love other people, we may find how we can be loved. We also have a garden that's well cultivated by a gardener's team of volunteers who make our gardens very, very beautiful. So we've each found a key to this miraculous garden. We're all in this garden, and we're all able to experience the delight that spiritual death and spiritual rebirth offers, just like little Mary Lennox did.